All right, thanks for watching Bible Points. And this is the second part, or part B, of A Word to Husbands, part 1. So we had part 1A, and now this is part 1B. And last time we looked at uh, the husband as lover. The husband as lover, and we were reading from a portion of a book by Gary Smalley, and that book was called If Only He Knew, Understanding Your Wife. And George Smalley was telling a story of a man named George who basically was divorced. His wife divorced him because he just did not love her. And but then they got remarried. And his marriage, George's marriage, was saved as he first committed himself to his wife, and it was not long after that he rekindled his love for her, and that saved the marriage. And so that was part 1A of A Word to Husbands, and we called that Husband as Lover. Now we're going to be looking at B of part 1, and the husband as provider. The husband as provider. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 28 and 29 says, "So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church." And so these verses tell us that a husband who loves his wife will be a man who provides for his wife. And from a heart of love, he will be committed to nourish and cherish his wife. The Bible says in Ephesians 5:23 that the husband, excuse me, is the head of the wife. And while some men like to gloat in this designation, the Bible is really saying that headship means that the husband is responsible for taking care of and providing for his wife. And so we're going to take some time in this message and look at what the Bible teaches that headship is all about. And so point A, headship means that the burden of support lies upon the husband. A sign of the moral breakdown of our times is how easy it is for husbands to place the responsibility upon their wives of providing. And some husbands want to be the head, they want to be the sole head, but they also want to share the responsibility for supporting their families with their wives. And husbands can't have it both ways. Did you know that God doesn't call a wife to provide for the family? She is called to other responsibilities, but making provision for her family, is not one of them. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 5:8 that if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel, which means an unbeliever. And so, husband, if you want to call yourself the head, then you ought to be the provider. Your wife shouldn't have to carry the burden of this responsibility. She should not have to always think in the back of her mind that if she would lose her home, that she would lose her security if she stopped bringing home the money. And if this is the case, you're not fulfilling your role and calling by God as the head of your wife and family. You know, many times a wife goes to work not because she wants to, but because she has to, in order to pay for the material things both she and her husband have not needed but wanted. Now, the Bible is not against a woman working. Just look at the Proverbs 31 woman who helped with the needs of the home. This excellent wife, this Proverbs 31 woman, even had 2 to 3 home businesses that she ran. So the Bible is teaching that the wife should be freed up by her husband to fulfill her calling of managing the home and nurturing your children. And the wife shouldn't have to step out of that role that God has set her heart upon so that she might take up the slack for her husband who isn't willing to sacrifice to provide for his family. Now, I know this sounds really hard, but the husband is to bear the burden of support for providing for his wife and his family. That's what headship means. That's what headship means. It means that the burden of support lies upon the husband. Now, this is point B. Headship means that the burden of security lies upon the husband. Now, security doesn't mean that you give ADT or Simply Safe a call to have a system installed. Security is something that is fostered in the woman's heart and mind as her husband conducts himself in a Christ-like manner, and he strives to sacrificially meet her spiritual, emotional, and physical needs. And when her needs are met, a woman gains security. When her needs are met, a woman glows with a sense of well-being. And if your wife is persistently reacting negatively to you, it may be because she perceives a threat to one or both, one or two of these important areas. Number one, her security. Number two, her established relationships. And when a wife is left out of the decision-making process, she feels insecure, especially if the decisions involve financial security or her living conditions. Her constant state of insecurity spreads like a disease to produce instability in other areas of marriage. Now, the Bible teaches that a husband, the Bible teaches the husband how to help his wife to feel secure in their marriage. And in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, we find that the Bible commands the husband in this verse. Husbands, it says, likewise dwell with them with understanding, with your wives with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. And so in this verse, we discover 5 ways a husband is to help his wife experience security in their marriage. Number 1, husband, you're supposed to notice her. Peter writes, husbands, likewise, live with your wives. You know, it's just the old-fashioned courtesy that I think Peter is talking about, to acknowledge your wife. Acknowledge her when you get home from work before you do anything else. Acknowledge her whenever she enters a room and you're talking to someone, or maybe you're on the phone. Acknowledge her. Acknowledge her when she leaves the table at the restaurant to go to the ladies' room. Acknowledge her. You acknowledge her as you notice her new hairstyles. You acknowledge her as you notice her new dress or outfit that she's wearing. You acknowledge her as you notice her perfume. You acknowledge her as you notice her decorating the home. And that gets me all the time. There's been some times when she's come to me saying, did you notice anything? Now, I don't know if she's talking about something that she's wearing, or maybe a new decorative figurine, or maybe some curtains or something. I don't know what she's talking about half the time, but we husbands, we notice our wives as we notice the things that she does around the house. We acknowledge her as we notice that she sacrificed to cook a good meal or a special meal. So notice her. You husbands, likewise, live with your wives. Notice her. And then listen to her. And Peter writes, live with your wives in an understanding way. Or another translation of the Bible says, according to knowledge. Husbands are to dwell with their wives according to knowledge. This means that you have to study your wife. You have to take great pains to understand her, like you would a repair manual or maybe a quarterback's playbook. And it's only through listening to her that you will come to know her. And someone has said, the first step to wisdom is silence. The second step is listening. Listening. And the worst thing a husband can do is to try to listen to his wife while working on a project, or playing video games, or watching television. And when my wife comes into the room and I'm watching television, I try to remember to cut the volume down or to press the pause button. Grunting, okay, that That will most surely let your wife know that you're not listening to her and you want to get back to your TV show or to the game as soon as possible. I remember a middle school teacher used to saying to our class, "Give me your undivided attention." Husbands who seek to understand and learn their wives will demonstrate that they're listening to the wife by repeating back to her what she said and by following through and addressing her concerns. Give a woman your ears and you will immediately open a pathway to their heart, someone has said. Listen to her. Listen to her. Thirdly, appreciate her. Appreciate her. And Peter says, live with your wives according to knowledge as with a weaker vessel, since she's a woman. And grant her honor. Grant her honor, Peter says. Peter says, grant her honor. And the term grant means to assign. And here the husband assigns his wife a place of honor. There was a Chinese legend that tells of a group of elderly, cultured gentlemen meeting often to exchange wisdom and drink tea. And each host tried to find the most finest and costly varieties of tea to serve to create this exotic blend that would arouse the admiration of his guests. And when it was time for the most respected and esteemed of the group to serve his tea, he served it with unprecedented ceremony, measuring the leaves from a golden box. The connoisseurs who assembled for this affair praised this exquisite tea. And the host smiled and said, "The tea you have found so delightful is the same tea our peasants drink. And I hope it will be a reminder to all that the good things in life are not necessarily the rarest or the most costly." And the moral of the story is that you husbands need not always get a second mortgage on your house to purchase a gift to show your wife that you appreciate her. Men tend to think that the bigger, picture is worth more than the sum of all of its parts. But I can remember being told not long ago that it's the little things that count. The little things that count. Like, and this may sound corny, but it's the truth. Holding her hands. As mundane that might seem to a man, holding hands means a lot to a woman. Help me, Lord. Help me, Lord. Paying her a compliment. Telling her you love her. New dress and new shade of lipstick is great. And it implies that you notice the little changes that she makes to look good, which, incidentally, are done for you. Saying something original. If you spend your time apart but are thinking of each other, tell her something like, "I miss the way your perfume smells when I'm with you." Again, I know that sounds kind of corny, but I tell you, say something original. And then be chivalrous. Chivalry is far from being dead, and most women still love it. So open her car door. Place her chair at the restaurant and offer your jacket if she's cold. Whatever you do, she'll appreciate it greatly. Another thing you could do is learn to do something for her. Women often think of men as being independent and self-serving, but learning to cook for her or making something special, something delicate for her with your own hands. Not to brag, but I've done a few things. If you go to YouTube and you do a search on Happy Birthday Debbie Brooks, you'll find a rap that I did for my wife. I wrote it several years ago. It's kind of old now, but every year for her birthday I play it. I also got a karaoke CD of love songs, and I recorded me singing, 6 or 7 love songs for my wife. And I took a jar, a glass jar, and I wrote on 100 strips of paper why I love her. And so at any time if she feels like she needs to, she can go into that jar and pull a piece of paper, and it was me letting her know why I love her, how I love her. So just do something for your wife, something original, something that shows that you really put some time into it. And then invite her out with your friends. And although you can still take time to spend with your buddies, invite her out to a night with the boys. I think that'll mean a lot to her, even though she might like push back against it, but do it, and then just treat her so well when you're with your friends. And do this on your own without her having to ask you, without her having to pressure you. And then compliment her for her beauty. And I know I've said that earlier, but tell your wife that you love to look at and appreciate her looks and her beauty. And then be specific. And then take a trip together. Plan a getaway with your wife. And don't forget to bring the accessories for late night entertainment, if you know what I mean. The Bible tells husbands to grant her honor. And interestingly, the word honor is the same Greek word translated in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 as precious. And it's used to describe Jesus Christ. And as Jesus is precious, so is your wife. And that's the meaning here, I believe. So appreciate her. And then number 4, respond to her. Let me go back. The first one was notice her. Then number 2, listen to her. Number 3, appreciate her. And then number 4, respond to her. Do you show any concerns when your wife is bumped and bruised by the cares of life? Do you show any concern when a child answers his or her mother disrespectfully? You know, this can dent her sense of personal worth when a husband stands by and just says nothing. A wife will notice how your eyes light up and your entire personality changes as you get excited about sports or other activities. And if your wife doesn't sense that same excitement in you when you're with her, she has this gnawing sense of failure because she feels she isn't as attractive to you as are your activities or your friends. And this can be devastating to a woman's sense of personal worth and security. So husbands, respond to your wife. And then number 5, minister to her. Minister to her. Peter writes, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, at the end of verse 7, grant her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And so this is an area of the marriage relationship that we're going to look at next time, because this is one area where husbands dare to tread. And so we're going to look at this next time. So thanks for joining us again at Bible Points, and may the Lord bless you.